Namaste, and welcome to this episode of All About Hinduism. I'm Sheetal Shah, the CFO and one of the managing directors at the Hindu American Foundation. Today, I am thrilled and honored to be joined by Swami Sarvapriyananda, the resident Swami and the head of the Vedanta Society here in New York City. Swamiji has a very extensive and impressive bio, but he is perhaps most well known for his many talks and discourses on Vedanta, which he delivers with incredible clarity, mixed with amusing and insightful personal stories. So welcome, Swamiji. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Now, before we begin, could you lead us in a short opening prayer?
All right. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste.
Thank you so much. So, as you know, International Yoga Day is almost here. So naturally, we are here to talk about yoga. Now, here in the West, and I feel like increasingly so in India too, yoga is commonly associated with asana or postures. But we, of course, know that it's far beyond that. And that's why I'm so thrilled that you've joined us to talk about yoga in its entirety today. You've been giving these wonderful weekly discourses on the Bhagavad Gita, where you delve into the 4 yogas. And for those who are listening and who don't know, all of Swamiji's Gita talks are available as podcasts. They are incredible and life-changing. My day is not complete if I haven't listened to one, so I highly recommend that you tune in. So why don't you just start, Swamiji, by please briefly covering the 4 yogas and how they're not necessarily independent, but they work together to help a spiritual seeker grow. In the Gita class, you have this very nice example of traveling to India, how you need to go from Vedanta Society to LaGuardia in a taxi, and then from LaGuardia to India in a plane. 2 separate modes of transportation, but both are necessary. So maybe you could tie that into your explanation.
All right. That's a good segue. But first, International Day of Yoga, yes. And that signifies the global phenomenon that yoga is now. But here I would just like to flag that yoga is Indian. The reason I want to say that is that years ago in Los Angeles, I was asked to give a talk to school kids about Hinduism. And in the course of my talk, I mentioned yoga. And one little boy excitedly got up and said, "Oh, you have yoga in India too." So, yes, it is a worldwide phenomenon, but it's firmly rooted in India and in ancient Hindu traditions. But yes, now it has spread across the world, and America played a central role in that. One of the persons, the source for this is probably Swami Vivekananda. About 12 years ago, there was this very nice Wall Street Journal article on the man who brought yoga to the West. And it was about Swami Vivekananda. 2013, because it was a sort of anniversary. Swami Vivekananda was born in 1863, so like I think it was 50 years since, 150 years probably since he came to the United States. 120 years probably. So what Swami Vivekananda did was, he did not introduce yoga to the United States as we know it now. What he did was he introduced spirituality, the spiritual dimension of yoga. Yoga is spirituality. The etymology of yoga, one meaning is to join or to connect. That means you join the individual sentient being like us to the supreme being, call it God or Brahman or the all consciousness, whatever you want to call it. So joining, in that sense of joining. Another is a much more direct etymological interpretation, which is meditation. So yoga means meditation. The four yogas, well, those are the four broad paths of spiritual practice. The classification actually is pretty modern. It goes back to Swami Vivekananda, who wrote these separate books on Raja Yoga, the way of meditation, Karma Yoga, the way of spiritualizing action, Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion or love, and a book, Jnana Yoga, which he did not write himself, but it's a collection of his lectures on the subject, on the way of the yoga of knowledge. The Wall Street Journal article I mentioned, it says that all those, maybe in Central Park who are stretching and doing asanas and all, they'd be shocked to hear Vivekananda say, "You are not your body." And they would be even more shocked to hear, "You're not even your mind." So the central idea in yoga is that our real nature is not what we think it is. We think we are these limited beings of flesh and blood. And that's what we are. We are born on such and such date, and we're going to die soon. And you make the best of it. And maybe yoga can help us to have a toned body and a kind of peaceful mind. But all that is true. But that's not all of it. There's a much deeper dimension to our beings, which is not flesh and blood, which is not even thoughts and feelings. Beyond the physical body, beyond the subtle body, that is the mind, is, you can call it the spirit, you can call it pure consciousness. In Sanskrit, this is called Atman or Purusha in yoga philosophy. And the claim in yoga is, if we make this shift, this paradigm shift, difficult though it is, if you make this paradigm shift from thinking of myself as this body, this person in this body, to that limitless awareness, that dimension of our being, then it solves our problems at a very deep existential level. You're much better able to cope with life, and our lives become much better. So that is real yoga, which reveals to us our real nature. And since ancient times in India, there have been so many of these paths, so many of these ways to discover that real nature. Every religion, in fact, can be viewed as a way or a collection of ways to back to our primordial nature. Yoga is that, a path back to our primordial nature. And the beautiful thing about it is, it's not just one path. There can be multiple paths. And so these multiple paths were classified broadly into four big umbrella terms. So, for example, meditation, the yoga of meditation. Well, there are many, many ways of meditation. But broadly speaking, we can call it the yoga of meditation. Swami Vivekananda called it the Raja Yoga, the kingly, the royal yoga. The paradigm there is, our minds are restless. And that is what is obscuring our real nature. So because of the uncontrolled, restless, turbulent nature of our minds, we, on one hand, we have a seriously degraded quality of life. We struggle. Most of the struggle is internal. It's not really outside. No matter how nice we make our lives outside, with wealth and popularity and entertainment and comforts, still we are unhappy, because the source of happiness and unhappiness is only remotely the outside world. It is proximately our inner world. The inner world of the mind, if it's not understood, it's not controlled and regulated, it can cause enormous amounts of suffering. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says that the mind is your best friend, the mind is your worst enemy. The mind which is uncontrolled, unregulated, running wild, that is our worst enemy. And we soon begin to realize the truth of that. And the mind which is controlled through yoga becomes our best friend. So the paradigm in the yoga of meditation, in Raja Yoga, is to control the mind through various techniques of meditation. But of course, there are preliminaries. You learn ethical disciplines. Because very early on, the yogis realized that an unethical life, unethical behavior, and higher yoga practices like meditation and absorption, they don't go together. Unethical life is directly connected to a restless mind. a troubled conscience, as the old saying is. You can't sleep with a troubled conscience. And it's true. It's true. So building up the ethical foundation, yama and niyama in Sanskrit, then to meditate, one needs to be still. And the best way to be still is to sit. You can lie down, but you'll fall asleep. So best is to sit. And there are so many postures which help us to sit well, correct our sitting posture. Then we need to regulate our breath. Why the breath? Because the yogis found that breathing is connected to the mind. It's very difficult to control and settle down the mind straight away. However, it's much easier to gain some control over the breath. So by regulating the breath, and there's a whole set of techniques here for different purposes. This is called pranayama, the regulation of the breath, helping in meditation. And then we go into pratyahara, which is to control the mind. We need to shut the doors of the mind for a while. You keep dumping stuff from the mind, stuff from the world into the mind, through our eyes, what we see, through our ears, what we hear, and that churns the mind continuously. So for a moment, for a while, I will not see, I will not hear, the sensation and the skin and tongue are neutral. In this way, the five senses are withdrawn from their objects, but the deeper practice of withdrawal is actually turning the mind inwards. You can't totally shut down the five senses. So the mind has to be inward directed. That means focused on something. And the yogis found that something with holy associations was the best way of focusing, calming, and uplifting the mind. So something like a chant like Om, or a mantra, or the visualization of a deity. There are many ways of focusing the mind on something. And that focus is called dharana, continuous focus of the mind with intermittent flickering. Not that you have to practice the flickering, the mind will flicker by itself. And one needs to bring it back again and again to the object of focus. Over time, and it takes time and systematic practice, the mind is a creature of habit. Just as the body is a creature of habit, the mind is also a creature of habit. In fact, in yoga philosophy, the mind is also regarded as a kind of a body. This is regarded as the physical body, sometimes translated as the gross body. It can be pretty gross. So the physical body or gross body, and the mind is called the subtle body. So it takes time. It responds to habit, and habit is generated only by systematic practice. Over time, this absorption becomes deeper, and the flickering ceases. This is called dhyana, meditation. Straight away, we see that dhyana, meditation, is the seventh of 8 components of yoga, the 8-limbed yoga. The 7th one is meditation. Therefore, it's a pretty advanced practice. We sort of jump into our meditation mats and think we're going to start meditating right away. It won't work for very good reason. And the meditation can, over time, deepen into absorption, which is called samadhi. At that point, the claim is, the hope is, our real nature becomes evident to us in that deeply calm and still, serene, pure state of the mind. So this is the way of meditation, the yoga of meditation, Raja Yoga. Then there is Jnana Yoga, the way of knowledge, where... Yes.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Because there's one limb that you didn't mention in the Raja Yoga, which is asana, the postures.
Yes.
And I have found that often many Hindu spiritual teachers from various lineages, they tend to sometimes downplay the role of Hatha Yoga. Now, obviously, that's primarily how people understand yoga today because it's physical, right? So we're physical beings. It's kind of a natural entry point into this practice of Raja Yoga or maybe other yogas, and then eventually into more inquiry into the self. So many of the people who do come to yoga, they're, SBNRs, spiritual but not religious. They're in search of something, but they're not quite sure what that something is. So maybe they start with asana, with the physical, and then maybe they start progressing to limbs like yamas and niyamas, starting to incorporate that into their lives. What sort of advice would you give to people who are coming in through the Hatha Yoga perspective?
Yes, so the asana aspect comes into Raja Yoga at the third limb, which is sitting, the posture. But asanas are not just for sitting. There's a whole science of asana. Asanas, by the way, just means the sitting. The for example, the mat on which you sit for meditation is also called asana, and the posture of sitting is also asana. But it's not just sitting, as you mentioned. There's a whole science of various physical postures, and the yogis discovered the amazing health benefits of these asanas. And so many of the asanas were designed to correct bad posture or correct diseases in the body. And they found very beneficial effects of doing these asanas. It's an amazing system of physical and vital and mental well-being. Physical means the physical body, what is called in Vedanta the Annamaya, the food body. The vital is the Pranamaya, which actually is the source of all our health and illness. And then, of course, higher than that, Manomaya, the mind. And these asanas have an effect throughout on the physical, on the vital, and on the mental. Um, and so there is a very rich system of Hatha Yoga, which is very ancient, but it's recently taken on a life of its own. It's extremely popular, especially in the United States, but now across the world. And this is sort of the mainstream that is celebrated in the International Day of Yoga. Yes, it is actually very helpful for spiritual life, even for the yoga of meditation, a balanced and healthy body. In fact, one of the great obstructions to meditation is sickness, is physical unfitness. For deep and prolonged meditation, you require a strong and stable body. And it has endless benefits for our lives. Being sick spoils everything, whether it's spirituality or our life in the society or personal lives. Now, the early pioneers who came here, there was Swami Satchidananda, Swami Vishnu Devananda. Swami Vivekananda himself did not directly teach Hatha Yoga, but there are tantalizing, anecdotes and reminiscences written by Americans who knew him. There is at least one or two anecdotes of him teaching the headstand to one of his American devotees and recommending, like the benefits of the Shirshasana. There is an anecdote. So he practiced himself, and he taught some of it to his close followers, but he did not include it in the four mainstream yogas, the main branches of the meditation and the devotion and the yoga of action and knowledge. But otherwise, there is simply no reason for underplaying it. It is a key component of spiritual practice. And later yoga teachers, I know of some, especially the teachers who come from the Divine Life Society lineage. So they combine devotion and Vedanta philosophy and meditation with the Hatha Yoga. So the Hatha Yoga is a centerpiece of the practice, and the others are combined with it. Yes, it can lead to body consciousness because it does have a great effect on the body, and we are sort of naturally body conscious. So it can lead, so one has to be just careful. The best way to be careful is don't make it the center of your practice over time. You can start with it, but if one is a spiritual seeker, then make one of those four yogas the center of your spiritual life, but keep the Hatha Yoga component for a very important part of our spiritual life, which is the body. An ancient Indian saying says that the body is the first basis for spiritual life. One should never neglect the body. My predecessor here, Swami Pavitranandaji, in the Vedanta Society of New York, I heard he used to say, don't abuse the horse you cannot dismount from. The body is the horse, and of course, don't abuse the horse anyway, but don't abuse the horse you cannot dismount from. The body, we are deeply enmeshed in this body, maybe until you become very advanced spiritual seekers. And many of the advanced spiritual seekers I have come across, I've noticed they were endowed with very good health. They're very strong people. So yes, the Hatha Yoga practices are first, incredible system for physical well-being. Second, a basis for further spiritual inquiry and practice. And third, they should be a part of your daily life. Don't make it the center over time, but it's certainly most welcome component of our practices. Yeah.
I ask because I have been practicing Ashtanga yoga as taught by Patabi Joyce for a number of years. And, I also went into it primarily from a physical perspective, but I happen to have been very blessed to have found a teacher who runs the Broome Street Ganesha Temple here in Manhattan. And so it was a beautiful medley of not just a physical practice, but it came with all of the other components of yoga. So I think I got particularly lucky in that respect, where it didn't just remain a physical practice. But I will say, I think that if you commit to something like that, it does teach you a certain amount of discipline. It teaches, which I think you also need, in a meditation practice. It teaches you, regularity. It teaches you perseverance. It teaches you quite a bit of things that you can then transfer over into a more spiritual quest.
In fact, I've seen its effects on the mind. I've seen persons who seem to be chronically depressed or unhappy just with the way their lives are going. And just after a few yoga classes, they feel much better. The moment you feel much better about yourself, you take a much more sunny look at life around you also. At this moment, since you mentioned Patabi Joyce, I'd just like to acknowledge and also extend our gratitude and remembrance towards these key personalities who brought yoga to the West over the last 100 years. Ever since Swami Vivekananda, especially the Hatha Yoga part of it often goes unacknowledged. There was Swami Satchidananda. I mean, I've never met him, of course, I just read about him. I am often invited to give talks at the Shivananda yoga ashrams. They were all established by Swami Vishnu Devananda, again from the Divine Life Society lineage, the disciples of Swami Shivananda in India. And they came to this country. I was just thinking, these people just by themselves, who did not have any monetary power. I was reading how Swami Vishnu Devanji came with $1 from India in those days. And they had such a tremendous impact. It's because the knowledge that they were bringing to the West, that itself has such amazing benefits, which we are all seeing around us now, that on the merit of that knowledge itself, on the merit of that knowledge system itself, they became very successful. Their influence, they had an outsized influence on American society. And then not just the swamis or the monks, but afterwards, these yoga practitioners, Patabi Joyce, Krishnamacharya, then BKS Iyengar, they were all from Mysore. Yep. And they came and they kickstarted the huge yoga revolution in the United States, but it's all over the world now, which is why, in fact, one of the primary reasons why we have the International Day of Yoga. Yes.
I think that, of all them that you've mentioned, I feel like Krishnamacharya doesn't necessarily get the credit that he deserves. He taught both Iyengar and Patabi Joyce, amongst many others who have kind of brought this Hatha Yoga practice to all of us. And, accounts of his life by some of his students, point to him almost being an enlightened being in the way that he lived every day of his life. It's pretty spectacular. So it's a great service, I think, that all of these teachers have done to us today.
And endless benefits to generation after generation, born long after they departed. Yeah. It's a great gift. So I also noticed that, as you said, an enlightened being, they were all spiritual seekers. Yeah. They're teaching Hatha Yoga as a part of their spiritual sadhana, and they hoped that people who were attracted by the Hatha Yoga would progress onto the deeper spiritual dimensions of yoga. I've heard this anecdote, maybe apocryphal, I don't know. Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, in his initial days teaching transcendental meditation, the system of meditation, which is an ancient system, but he gave it the name transcendental meditation here in the West. And then going back in the early days to India, and his brother monks asking him, what is it that we hear that you're doing in the West, teaching the Americans that by meditation your stress will be less, and even though you won't get wrinkles, your immunity system will be boosted. But that's not the purpose of meditation. I mean, those are definitely real benefits, but that's not the central purpose. Its purpose is enlightenment, realizing who we are truly. Then it seems that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi answered, yes, I teach them what they want in the hope that they will want what I want to teach them. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, that one progresses and one sees that. If not in the mass of yoga practitioners, at least in the yoga teachers themselves, the Hatha Yoga teachers themselves. They, in the West, you see, they become interested after some time in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Then they become interested in Sanskrit, in the Gita, in the higher dimensions of meditation, devotion, and so on. The one thing leads, it's interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in one of the things that we can cover in all of the yogas, but that plays an important role, even in Hatha Yoga, and that Krishnamacharya used to focus on, and you speak about this all the time in your Gita courses, is this importance of controlling the senses, restraining your senses. And one of the, my yoga teacher, for example, and pretty much all Ashtanga yoga teachers, if you go into a class, there's no mirrors, there's no music. And, I asked once, and my teacher said, it's hard enough to concentrate as it is. Why add more distractions to your practice? Mm. And, so I was reading this book on Krishnamacharya, and one of his students wrote that, Krishnamacharya really took sense restraint to another level, to the point that he did everything he could every day to restrain his senses. One thing that he did was he would limit visual sensory input. When he walked down the path, he would always keep his eyes down, so that he was limiting what he's intaking, which I thought was incredible. It's not very practical here in New York City in rush hour, but this idea of self-control is really built in through all of the different kinds of yogas. So I don't want to keep you too much on Raja Yoga, but if you have any thoughts there around tips for restraining senses.
Just following on to what you said, I remember reading Swami Vivekananda speaking about Jnana Yoga, the way of knowledge, where he says that in this yoga, the practice is chiefly the restraint of the senses. Now, if you approach Jnana Yoga, you would think that the practice is study, it is reasoning, it is meditation, in Sanskrit, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. But Swami Vivekananda says, no, all of those are pretty easy. But they are all based on a foundation of the restraint of the senses. That alone deepens your practice into genuine meditation. And later on, when you make the breakthrough, the restraint of the senses enables you to manifest that spiritual breakthrough in your life, to live the life, to live the talk, walk the talk, as it were. So yes, restraint of the senses, you find it all through the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Krishna circles back to it again and again. The sensory system is extremely powerful, and it ties up a lot of our cognitive resources. Just the difference between keeping your eyes open and keeping the eyes closed. Just keeping the eyes closed frees up a lot of your attention and cognitive resources. That's why even if you want to appreciate something in the senses, some piece of very wonderful music, you'll see automatically people close their eyes to appreciate it. Even you're tasting a particularly nice cookie or something, they'll close their eyes to savor it. That shows that our senses tie up our attention tremendously. And yoga is about attention. The attention needs to be freed up rather than tied up. Yes, moving on to the other yogas, the yoga of knowledge, which is called Jnana Yoga. There, the centerpiece is not so much meditation. Meditation is part of it, but it's not the centerpiece. The centerpiece is inquiry, an inquiry into our experience. And very soon we see all experience, whether it is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, enjoying, suffering, whatever, remembering, understanding, all experience, imagination all experience is consciousness based. It is all emerging from consciousness, powered by consciousness. So our attention goes back to its source, which is consciousness. We become aware of awareness. And then we explore that. We begin to see awareness is the very nature of the self. Consciousness is the very nature of who we are. And that leads to deeper dimensions of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, which through that door of awareness, we realize our real nature as a spiritual being and not as a physical being or even a mental being. That's one pathway. Now, both of these pathways, the yogic pathway of meditation, the Raja Yoga, and the Jnana Yoga pathway of knowledge, inquiry, they seem a little dry and difficult, and they are difficult. In contrast to which, there's the way of the yoga of love, of devotion, which is much more sweet, which comes much more easily to us, where love focused towards a deity. So it could be God in the Christian sense, or in Islam, or in Judaism, or in the tremendous varieties of ways in which God is experienced and construed in Hinduism, as Shiva, as Vishnu, as Devi, Kali. For Sri Ramakrishna, his all in all was his divine mother, Kali. Now, once we have that, then we can pour out our hearts in devotion, in prayer, in adoration, worship, surrender. Now, we are mostly creatures of emotions. No matter how we like to think of ourselves as intellectual, we often see this, that we may understand something very well, but it's very difficult for us to live it in life. The moment we try to walk the talk, then we find our emotions rebelling, because inside something says that, yeah, it's great, but I don't want it. At least I don't want it yet. I want the cookie, or I want something that is much more mundane. So this wanting, which flows out, desire, which flows out into the world in 100 different streams, you gather it into one almighty onrush, a stream of love, which you direct towards God. So this becomes the yoga of love, of devotion. And this is not unknown, because this yoga forms the basis of most world religions, at least the theistic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, various Hindu traditions. They are all based on love, faith, adoration, devotion to God. Basically, this is what yoga calls the yoga of love, or Bhakti Yoga. Then there is another yoga, often downplayed, Karma Yoga.
Can I ask you a question on Bhakti Yoga first?
Yes.
So my one question here is, sometimes there's this self-consciousness that we've noticed in our work at HAF amongst kind of these educated elite Hindus around bhakti, and perhaps more broadly around this concept of the role of religion. It's often overshadowed by secularism in modern societies, right? I often hear from these Hindus or many yoga students, spiritual, I'm not really religious. They may not have that Ishta Devata. They may not have that belief. So what is bhakti for those people in the 21st century? And how do we evoke more of this bhakti in a culture that seems to privilege rationality or science over just pure bhakti?
Let's confront the difficulty head on. It's not easy. The reason being, reason itself. Because in this age of science, there is a great deal of skepticism about God. If you talk about God, well, what about the atheists? What about Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett and so on? Atheism is a major movement in world culture today. Somebody said there haven't been as many atheists and agnostics ever in history as we have today in our world. And that's because this is the age of reason. This is the age of science. And science has tremendous power because of its obvious success. It's obviously true. Whereas bhakti, among all the yogas, bhakti begins with faith. In fact, if you look at the word used for religion in the United States, is faith. Faith means belief. And not belief blindly, belief with good reason. There is tradition, there are texts, there are spiritual masters who tell you, even though you don't know it now, even though it's not a fact for you now, believe that God is there, such and such characteristics of God. It's there, it's true, and it can be experienced in higher mystic states. But there is no discounting the fact that in the initial stages, it's all belief, and therefore it can be attacked. And it can be viewed with skepticism as it is. Whereas the other yogas, if you see the yoga of meditation, Raja Yoga, there the claim is not belief. There the claim is practice in this way and you will get the results in your own life, in your direct experience, which will prove to you the claims of religion. As Vivekananda said, if God exists, I should be able to see God. If I have an immortal soul, I should be able to feel it. And Raja Yoga promises to deliver. You will feel it. You will see it. So this is an empirical age, and we want empirical evidence. Raja Yoga delivers a kind of empirical evidence, which is an internal experience, which is very convincing. For those who have had it, it's tremendously convincing. Jnana Yoga goes even a step further. It says you don't even have to wait for extraordinary mystical experiences. Just our daily experience of waking, dreaming, sleeping, our daily experiences of seeing something. I'm the seer and I see this stuff. Just that much. Who doesn't have it? Everybody has it. All experience is subject and object. That is enough for Jnana Yoga to start. So Jnana Yoga and Raja Yoga are powerful answers to this modern age of skepticism. And I often see people who are spiritual but not religious, or who are skeptical, they find Jnana Yoga much more amenable, some form of meditation much more acceptable. And then, miraculously almost, very quickly, they move on to Bhakti Yoga also. Once they ascertain that the intellect says that such a thing, a spiritual reality, is possible, it's logical, it's not irrational, it even seems inevitable, then you quickly see what is being done in Bhakti Yoga is that thing is taken on faith, and people treat it as God, and they can set up a relationship of devotion to it. Bhakti becomes much more acceptable after a period of Jnana and Raja Yogas. But it is, if one has faith, then you are blessed, because it really reinforces our spiritual practice. It's extremely important. If one does not have faith, it becomes a problem in Raja Yoga and Jnana Yoga also, because then our senses, our desires, and our mind and our heart runs in 100 different directions. Our philosophy may be one thing, our morning and evening meditation may be one thing, but the rest of our life and our heart, it flows towards the world as it did earlier. And then it throws up big obstructions on our spiritual path. So Bhakti Yoga is extremely powerful, very useful. And I've seen just about every Raja Yogi or Jnana Yogi, they all had some bhakti practice. All of them. I haven't seen a single one who is so dry as to not bring to play his or her emotions into spiritual life. And finally, we have the way of Karma Yoga. In the traditional paths in India, Karma Yoga was sort of seen as the first step. You do two things there. We clean up our lives. Just put it that way. Make sure that our lives are ethical as far as we can. It's a long process. One cannot become perfectly ethical straight away, but definitely move towards truth, some movement towards self-control and discipline, some towards compassion, non-violence. So these practices, they form, without that, no spiritual practice is possible. So Karma Yoga does that to begin with. And then you move from an ethical life to a selfless life. So ethical work, then selfless work. I can be ethical and still be selfish. I can keep myself within the realms of the law, and I won't do anything illegal. I won't do anything indecent, but still I'm living for my own self-gratification. And society permits that, it's fine. But to advance in yoga, one must move beyond the self to selflessness. And so what we try to do is dedicate our actions to God if you believe in God. If you do not believe in God, dedicate our actions to the welfare of all beings, or even just this more hard, the duty, work for work's sake, let us say. That work itself becomes the spiritual discipline, but it's a selfless work, where then one sees that work doesn't become a drag. work also doesn't become a source of tension and conflict. And it purifies the mind. And the pure mind, the spiritual truth is revealed. So there are these four broad paths: the path of jnana, knowledge; the path of meditation, Raja Yoga; the path of bhakti, devotion, Bhakti Yoga; and the path of spiritualizing our work lives. Vivekananda gave a lot of stress on that. I think he was being prophetic, looking into the future, looking into Manhattan today. Most of our time and energy in the world, if you're an adult, most of your time and energy is taken up by work at home or in your community or in your workplace, wherever it is. Time, energy goes into work. And if we divorce work and spirituality, what will happen is our spiritual practices will be sucked dry of energy and time. We'll have no time left over. It'll just become sort of something to be done very quickly because most of our time has gone for work. Most of our energy has gone there. And if we divorce spirituality from work, then work very soon will become meaningless. After some time, we find it pointless. If work can become spiritual practice, then our spiritual practice is invigorated and work itself gets deep, transcendent meaning.
So I want to continue on this karma yoga path. So I think many people who have read the Gita in many Hindu households, one of the things that keeps coming up about karma yoga is this idea of not being attached to the results. You do the work for the work itself, leave the results to Bhagwan or, consciousness or whatever. Don't get tied to those results. Now, in theory, it's a really nice practice. For someone like me who works at HAF, probably easier to implement. But for people, let's say in this city, like my husband, he's in finance. Like so many people in New York City, this sort of idea doesn't necessarily feel like it's within their grasp, right? The intense pressure, it's unyielding. There's no forgiveness for mistakes. And so it's nice. We would like to think, okay, I'll give it my all. And whether I win or lose the deal, it's up to Bhagwan. It doesn't matter. But the reality, right, when you go back to work and you've lost $100 million deal and your livelihood and your family's livelihood depends on this job, is that I'm now attached to these results because a lot is riding on these results. So what sort of practical advice can you give to someone like my husband or these others who are in these high pressure jobs? How do they practice karma yoga at the job?
Yes. Now, one thing has to be understood. When we say results don't matter, leave it to God, that's not true. What matters, results do matter. But in karma yoga, we're looking for a different kind of result. Yoga is it's very meaningful. Any kind of yoga. See, in Raja Yoga, in Jnana Yoga, in Bhakti Yoga, we are looking for a result, which is a spiritual result. And equally so in Karma Yoga. So in Karma Yoga, why am I doing Karma Yoga? Not for nothing, not purposeless. That would be crazy. But here, earlier karma has a purpose. That is, I have to earn $1 million on Wall Street. That's the purpose of the karma that I'm doing, the work that I'm doing in the workplace. Now the same karma has another purpose. It is to become enlightened. It will help me to become enlightened. This becomes my spiritual practice. How does that make a difference? Now, when I do the work, the results will come. If you do something in the world, the result will come. If you work in finance, you will make money or sometimes lose money also. Those are the results. But now I am not tying my success to the winning or losing of the money. I am tying my success to my spiritual progress. For example, let me give you a clear example based on the background you provided. The tremendous pressures of working on Wall Street. I sometimes think that's the reason why the Bhagavad Gita was set in the battlefield, not in an ashram, not in a yoga studio, but in the battlefield. That's the worst kind of action that human beings can engage in, that is war. Now, Krishna claims you can practice karma yoga in the war, in the middle of the war, actually involving killing people, fighting with your enemies. Now, in the midst of tremendous pressure, where you can win, you can make a great deal with millions of dollars riding on the result, or you can lose it and lose millions of dollars. Earlier, because that success was the goal and avoiding failure was the goal. Then if I get the success, I'm delighted. If I lose millions of dollars, it's devastating. I feel horrible. I might even lose my job. This is the normal state of affairs. Now, karma yoga, what does it do? If I'm doing it as karma yoga, then my goal would be that I will maintain equanimity in the middle of the work. So the work has to be done well. Just as a puja in the worship room, I'm not expecting anything back from it except my own spiritual progress. But that does not mean I will do it haphazardly. If I do it haphazardly, if I don't do it with attention, then my spiritual progress is lost anyway. Similarly, the work in your finance company, on Wall Street, that has to be done with tremendous focus. And see, here is one of the great advantages of karma yoga. If I'm doing karma, just action for the results, then my focus will waver. I'll be continuously assaulted by stress, by tension, because my eyes are on the goal, on the consequences, the good consequences and the possible bad consequences. My mind is full of anxiety and expectation. Whereas if I transform into karma yoga, my goal is not to get that money or to avoid the losses. My goal is those will be done, but my goal is to maintain inner equanimity, a meditative state of mind while working. If I have succeeded in that, my karma yoga has succeeded, no matter what the results. Then with that attitude, when I go into the work, I'll have much better focus, a great deal of detachment, a cool mind, a relaxed mind, capable of engaging and responding to the ever-evolving situation calmly without burning myself out. Most of the burning myself out is because of emotions. Emotions are much calmer when I'm doing karma yoga. This is not theoretical. I have seen it. I've seen monks running huge institutions. And I used to think, they're so busy. Doesn't it affect their spiritual lives? But I found those monks are the ones who have best meditation. Maybe they should meditate for a shorter period of time. They are busy throughout the day. But because the minds are so well trained in work and so equanimous in the middle of work, the moment they want to pull it out and put it in the object of meditation, the mind responds. Karma yoga enables, it's actual learning, deepens your meditation rather than making you over busy. So it is very good for your work, very good for your family life, and for your inner mental life. So this is how karma yoga works. By shifting your attention from that deal to how is my mind responding? Is my calm in the middle of, yes, I'm going to close the deal and it's going to be great. Or, oh no, it didn't go well, I'm losing that. Is my mind still calm and equanimous? You might still say, how? In a multi-million-dollar deal, how can you pull back? Arjuna was asked to pull back from the actual battlefield while fighting the battle, yet you have to be calm. One way is to visualize time and space, the vastness of time. In the course of human history, in millions of years, in thousands of years of civilization, this big deal, no matter how big it is, it will be soon forgotten. It's less than a blip. Even in the course of my life, 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, this would have faded into insignificance, no matter how great and intense it was in those days in the office in Wall Street. So when we bring that into mind and then dive back into work, it'll be with much greater peace.
I think so. I think the next question on that would be, that part sounds great, where it's okay, I can maybe take a step back and try to see how I'm responding to these things. But deep down, I know that it's not just the win or loss of this deal that, could happen. Like a family's livelihood could be dependent upon it. And maybe not just a single deal here or there, but over the course of time, right? So for many families, right, it's one breadwinner and their children, everything is paid for by that one person. So then there's this kind of underlying stress that exists, right? That stress to say, okay, there's a lot of people who are dependent upon me. So again, it puts the mind in a very different state.
Yes. And it may not be all bad, even for spirituality. What you're talking about is duty. Now, it's very interesting. What role does karma yoga, what role does duty play in karma yoga? In karma yoga, duty is important. It imposes a structure and a pressure upon us. So here is duty. Here is a spouse and the little children whose lives are dependent on how I perform in the job, and so the pressure is on. Otherwise, without the duty, one might sink into passivity and dissoluteness. It's quite possible. I'll give you a corresponding example from the ashram. I saw the difference between being in an ashram. In an ashram, you have a structure imposed on you. I remember a senior monk correcting a young monk, saying that, look, there is this, you are in charge of the bookshop. And if you don't open the bookshop on time, it's not well kept. People will come and complain to the head of the ashram that the bookshop is not open. What happened? It says it's supposed to be open at 10 o'clock or something. So the ashram imposes a structure upon you. And that is good for the mind. If I'm not in the ashram, I've tried this also personally, staying alone in the mountains. No pressure. Nobody's going to see you and ask. Nobody's holding you to account. You're not accountable to anything or anybody. And because it's India, monks are highly regarded. You will get your daily meal. It will be simple, but it's enough to nourish you. If you don't want anything else, you're perfectly fine. You have a little hut or a cave to stay, and the society will share their resources with food with you. Now, what do? If you are a genuine spiritual seeker, you will plunge into meditation, prayer, and study. But for most of us, once the structure is removed, very soon the mind can sink into passivity, the lazy monk syndrome. And that is deadly for spiritual progress. It kills spiritual progress. That is, in Sanskrit, it's called tamas, darkness, indolence, laziness. Therefore, society imposes a structure, a duty, which seems to be terrible, but it actually, from karma yoga perspective, duty helps us to progress. So duty is good, but duty it can become a huge burden in the sense that I have to do this. I see no way out. I feel trapped. That's where karma yoga comes in. That duty becomes part of my spiritual journey towards enlightenment. See, my goal is enlightenment. That has to be, otherwise you're not a yogi. My goal is spiritual progress. Otherwise you're not a yogi. If I made up my mind internally, my ultimate goal is spiritual progress. And that's why it's so beautiful to have a spiritual society like India, where spiritual progress, enlightenment is something said to be open to everybody. Even if people are not interested in it, we know in the background such a thing is there, it's possible, and one day I have to go there. That's a great thing because it gives you a permanent source of meaning in life. If you don't have that, if it's just a secular society, then you have a few secular goals. And once you see through that, then you find life itself, soon I'm going to get old and die. That's it. What happened? What's the point of it all? Is there a transcendent point? If a secular society, it seems to be part of the society you live in. Yes, there is a transcendent point. Everybody believes in it and has so believed in for thousands of years. And you see all these people, examples who are pursuing it. So my duty becomes part of my spiritual evolution. The thing to know about duty is, because it's part of my spiritual practice, have a sense that I'm doing it out of freedom. I'm doing it out of love. Not because I have to do it. I have been given an opportunity of being of use to a family, to a community, to a nation, or to humanity. And it's great. It's giving me the benefit of spiritual progress. And it's developing my character, my spiritual power. So then duty becomes palatable.
That's beautiful. I like this. I love this idea of doing it out of a sense of love, having the ability to serve family or community or others. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I think it's something that can resonate with anyone.
Yes. Suppose, on the other hand, I'm not a committed yogi, and suddenly society ejects you from society. All right. You don't have a family. You don't have people who look up to you. Nobody expects anything from you. You have nobody has anything to do with you. You have nothing to do with anybody. Now what do? 1 or 2 days you might relax. That's very nice. And so, but within 1 or 2 days is okay. But 1 year, 2 years, 20 years, 40, 50 years, oh no. One can immediately be plagued by a sense of utter meaninglessness in life, pointlessness in life. Unless one has that spiritual level, very few have. They can immediately plunge into the transcendent, into God or Brahman. For the rest of us, duty or a structure is actually useful, no matter how tiresome it seems.
Well, on that note, I'll ask one last question on karma yoga, and then we can wrap it up. So you mentioned in India, there's a lot of value on spirituality and this journey that we're all on, and there's also a great deal of respect for swamis and monks and sadhus. That being said, most parents don't want their kids to become a monk. They want them to go to an IIT or an IIM, or even here, right? A lot of the Indian American mentality is there's a huge focus on performance in school, getting the A plus. Nothing short of that will do. We put a lot of pressure on our children to perform, and from a young age, and I'm saying this because I have a 9-year-old son, that idea of results being the yardstick gets ingrained into our head, that, you got to perform, you got to perform, you got to perform. And it's a fine balance, because sometimes if you kind of talk too theoretical, you don't want your young child to say, well, if it's all up to Ishvara, then why do I really have to try? I might as well just take the test and see what comes of it, right? So you want to strike a balance between pushing your child to study and to do the work, but not making their whole self-worth be based off of whatever grade they get, or whether they win or lose. Do you have any practical tips, advice for parents on what's a nice way, a nice middle ground of guiding children?
Yes. First of all, it's not all up to Ishvara. It's really up to you. Ishvara will always you can rely on Ishvara, on God, to do his, her, or its bit. They'll always do it. God doesn't fail us. Where the failure comes is at our level. We have to do our bit. So here's the key. Change the focus from results to effort. Effort is within the realm of everybody. Even a little kid can make an effort. So I am looking at the effort that you are making. And if the results come, great. If the results are not what I wanted or what you wanted, still great, because you made the effort. Did you put in the hours of study? Did you put in the hours of practice at whatever you're doing, music or sports or whatever? That's great. And over time, this focus on effort changes karma into karma yoga, not on results. And the beauty of it is, results are the ends. Effort is the means. And the principle of getting the results is to focus on the means rather than on the ends. If you focus on the effort, the results will come of themselves. Whereas if you focus on the results, the effect will be that there is stress, there is tension, there is mental wear and tear, there's a kind of pointlessness. Notice, getting the results is only temporarily satisfying. You've got the results, you feel good, people praise you, but then people forget and move on. And you also, the joy from the result starts diminishing. Whereas effort, making an effort, is enriching. It increases capacity. It increases capacity for work, increases our concentration, focus, increases our skills, both at work and in community relations with people. All of these, this is the beauty of karma yoga. See, all the other yogas, Bhakti Yoga is between you and God. You know and God knows. Dhyana Yoga, Raja Yoga is only in your mind. It's entirely private. Jnana Yoga can often become just an intellectual exercise. So bhakti, meditation, and knowledge, those paths are very private. Whereas karma yoga is the only one which connects you continuously with community, with other people. And it leads to building up, the muscles of effort, of moral strength, of capacity, of character, and which is of tremendous use to the higher yogas, but is also used to community and used to yourself. If the child makes an effort, the personality and the character of the child is developed. So keep the child's eyes on effort, keep the parents' eyes on the effort, what the child is putting into the activity. Work hard, work smart, and the result will take care of itself.
Wonderful advice, Swamiji. Well, that I think we will wrap up. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk on yoga. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for making the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, Sheetal ji, and happy International Day of Yoga.
Well, that's it for this episode of That's So Hindu. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it now with someone who you think will like it too. Please also like, follow, and/or subscribe to this show on whatever platform you're listening to it on. You can help ensure that more of these get made by making a donation to HAF at www.hinduamerican.org/donate. Thanks again for listening.